Hello and welcome to Planet Poetry. I'm Robin Houghton.
And I'm Peter Kenny. And we've got a bumper Christmas special for you today. Robin will be interviewing Di Slaney and Sharon Black, two people for the price of one interview, which is novel for us and exciting. And they'll be talking about what it's like to be both a poetry publisher and a practicing poet. We've had a go at that, haven't we, Robin? With Telltale Press.
We have, haven't we? Yes. It's fascinating what Di and Sharon have to say because there's, two quite different setups. And plus they were great to talk to. We had a lot of fun doing a three-way chat.
And also, amid all the baubles and the pine needles, Robin and I chat about our pre-Christmas reading. I sort of can't seem to stray far away from childhood when I think about Christmas. Yeah, there'll be a few odds and ends and scattered.
Yes, a few festive notes creeping into the old poddy.
So anyway, enough of all this. Let's hear from our guests, Di Slaney and Sharon Black.
Sharon Black is from Glasgow and lives in a remote valley of the Cevennes Mountains. Her poetry is published widely and has won many prizes. She's had 2 full collections published, and a pamphlet, Rib, is out now from Wayleaf Press. Her 3rd and 4th full collections will appear in 2022 with Vagabond Voices and Drunk Muse Press, respectively. Di Slaney lives in an ancient farmhouse in Nottinghamshire, where she runs a livestock sanctuary and independent publisher Candlestick Press. Like Sharon, she's widely published and has had a good deal of competition success. Her first collection, Reward for Winter, was published in 2016, and a second collection, Herd Queen, in 2020, both by Valley Press. Di is Poet in Residence at Nottinghamshire Local History Association. So a big welcome to Planet Poetry to Sharon Black and Di Slaney. Hello, Sharon and Di.
Hello, Robin.
Sharon, you're somewhere in France?
I am. I'm in the Cevennes Mountains of the Languedoc region in France. So sort of 4/5 of the way down, right in the middle. I often say to people when I'm, describing where we live that there are more goats live here than people, which is fairly accurate.
Okay.
It's a very small, remote valley that we live in.
Well, that's quite interesting because, Di, I think you live somewhere with more goats than people, don't you?
Definitely more goats than people here in our house, for sure. Yeah. So I live in Bilsthorpe, which is a small village in North Nottinghamshire, not too far from Sherwood Forest.
Gosh, yes. Well, we'll talk a bit more about your various where you're living, I think, as we go along. But the thing, of course, that has brought you both together here is you are both publishers of poetry, as well as poets in your own right. And this is what I think we're really interested to hear about, how you managed to kind of do both those roles and the kind of tensions perhaps that arise there. So first of all, maybe Sharon, tell us a bit how you even got into this whole publishing world.
Well, I took over Pindrop in 2016 from its previous publisher, editor and founder, Joe Hemmant. And at the time I had published 2 collections of my own, had been writing poetry seriously for about 10 years. And my job running a retreat here in France with my husband was going smoothly after many years of hard work, building it up. And our 2 daughters were getting older, becoming more independent, and essentially I was ready for a new challenge. I'd been lucky to have a wonderful mentor in the form of Bill Greenwell with his online poetry clinics. I felt I'd learned enough about the craft of poetry to be able to give something back to the poetry community. And then the idea of running a poetry press originally came about when the publisher of my second collection, Two Ravens Press, she had told me that she had enough of publishing, wanted to sell up, and that sparked the original idea, why not offer to take over Two Ravens Press. And in the event, that particular arrangement didn't work out with her, but when Joe Hemmant of Pindrop mentioned a few months later that she was interested in moving on to other challenges, I suggested that I take it over if she was happy for that to happen. And I bit the bullet and she passed the press to me.
Interesting. So you inherited her list of, how long had it been going, Pindrop, before then?
She set it up in 2010, I believe. So she'd been running it for 6 years and probably had, about 20 poets on her backlist. And so, so I took over the titles that she had put out and started adding my own in 2016.
So do you publish full collections or pamphlets or?
Only full collections. Yeah, I publish single author, full collections, and put out at the moment 4 titles a year. It feels to me sort of instinctively like quite a good manageable number for one person.
Yeah.
I suppose it depends how much other work you have on the side, but for me in my situation that fits in quite nicely.
I mean, that's quite a lot of work, isn't it? I mean, I had a small period of time with in a poetry publishing collective. Peter and I ran Telltale Press with 3 others, and that was quite a lot of work to put out even one book. As you say, you're doing it yourself. A lot of stuff goes into it. Di, has your experience been anything similar to that, or was yours a different trajectory into publishing and poetry?
Quite a bit different trajectory, really. In 2010, I met the founder of Candlestick Press at an SME workshop that I think I was speaking at. It was about growing your business from being small into being a larger business, because prior to that I'd been running a marketing agency which started off as a one-woman band and expanded to be a much bigger team. So having met Jenny Swan there and seen the Candlestick range as it was then, I think it was half a dozen titles but lots of potential. Jenny was looking for a business partner, and I thought, well, why not see if poetry could become commercial? You could make a proper business out of poetry. If there was ever going to be a vehicle to do it, I thought it was going to be this, because it had got quite a lot of commercial appeal. So that was back in 2010. And then having kind of grown the business to a certain size, then in 2016, which must have been an auspicious year for takeovers or people changing jobs, I took on the press as a sole editor and publisher from Jenny, and I've been running it since. So it's been kind of a series of accidental steps rather than anything deliberate.
And for listeners that don't know, Candlestick Press is unique, really, isn't it? Your model is something quite different. Do you want to tell us about that?
Yes, so it's poetry pamphlets designed to be sent instead of a card. So they are 10 poems about, sometimes 12 poems about a certain subject, and they're provided in a beautifully designed pamphlet with a lovely cover, along with a bookmark and an envelope, so you send it to somebody else. So the idea is that you would maybe find something in a gift shop or a bookshop that appeals to the person that you're intending to send it to, whether it's their hobby or something's happened to them, and we provide a themed pamphlet that would be suitable for that occasion.
I remember picking up a couple of your pamphlets as cards, as it were, at the Poetry Book Fair, I think some years back, but I can't remember which. I think one was about cats, but not sure about the one, because I suppose the thing is, because you get them and then you say you give them away, so then I sort of think, I can't remember which one I had now because I gave it away. Should have given myself one.
Well, that's the dream, is that you buy one for yourself and one for somebody else, you see. So.
Should have done that. Got that wrong. But that's a really neat idea, which kind of brings me on to the next question for both of you, which is the thorny issue of, is poetry publishing a business? Can it be a business, or is it always going to be, to a certain extent, more or less, a labour of love? I know that poetry presses, there are different views on this. Where do both of you stand? Di, give us your thoughts on that.
Business. For me, it is a business. It's not a labour of love. I went into it with a business intention. I'm only still in it because it functions as a business. If it didn't work, if it wasn't commercially viable, if it didn't make a profit, I wouldn't be able to do it anymore. So that is very different, I think.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying that that's right or wrong. That's just how that works for me. And perhaps because of the nature of the product, that makes it a much cleaner decision.
Does it help the fact that you've got a marketing background? Do you think that a lot of poets don't come in from any kind of commercial skills in that sense.
I think so. And I think having already had a small business that was mine and that, was my baby and that I'd loved and grown, that had been my labour of love, if you like. And that was also commercial and, and viable. Whereas this was something else. This was looking at a business through a different lens. And it just happened to be poetry. I suppose I could have ended up doing anything else to see if it worked. But it happened to be poetry.
Sharon, what's your answer to that question, do you think?
Well, that's very interesting because I'm at the complete other extreme. I'm not in pin drop to make money from it, essentially because I knew or, felt fairly certain when I took over pin drop that knowing what I did about Joe Hemant's experience with the press and from other small press publishers that I'd spoken to who were more in the traditional model of publishing, so not like yourself, Di, because you clearly do something quite different in terms of the format. But I was sure I wouldn't make a living from it. And I didn't go into pin drop to make a living because I already have a job here. And for me, it was really about doing something I felt I could do because I wanted a new challenge personally, professionally, and I love poetry. And so I think that you really do. My feeling is anyway that unless you're a very big outfit, like Blood Axe or Carcanet or something like that, or unless you have something really different, I doubt that anybody really could make a living from it unless they're in receipt of government funding or unless they're one of these big outfits, which again, probably have, public backing. Yeah. It's very much a labour of love for me. I mean, I love editing. I love publishing. And one of the privileges I think that gives me is that I can literally publish whatever I want to. I'm not looking at work coming into me with a view of will it sell? I mean, obviously, I'm hoping that that's the case, but my primary aim is to produce books that I believe should be out there, should be read, and that I believe are giving a voice to a poet who, deserves to be heard.
Yeah, it's interesting, isn't it? I mean, I've heard Tony Fraser at Shearsman, I think, talking about this, and I don't know how he manages to, but he puts out like 100 titles a year or something. You think, like, what does that man does he ever sleep or anything? It's really interesting to hear how different publishers approach this. Di, for the Candlestick pamphlets as cards, you engage a poet for the selection process. Is that right?
So there are different routes in. Sometimes we'll edit it in-house. It'll be myself or Kathy doing the editing, or sometimes it'll be a guest editor, or sometimes it'll be a hybrid where we've got someone to introduce the pamphlet, someone who's linked to the theme, like Monty Don for Gardens, and then we will select the poems behind the scenes.
Right.
So it's really on a pamphlet by pamphlet basis we kind of make that call depending on what the topic is, and it's not all about the numbers. For me, running it as a business, it has to be a commercial venture, but the reason I like the business is because of what it does in the market, and because people are so fond of it, and because people love the model, and it engages people with poetry in a different way. So it's talking to people who wouldn't ordinarily think that poetry was for them, and that's the big win for me. That's the thing that keeps me interested and keeps me thinking, this has still got mileage. This is still worthwhile. Yeah. Is the fact is spreading the poetry word far and wide.
Are you surprised no one else has taken up a similar model, or have they?
I think people have tried doing similar things, but it's hugely laborious, and it is, each pamphlet only pays its way because of the broad distribution that it's got. If you didn't have a broad distribution network for each title, you would never make the investment costs in that pay, the permissions cost, the creative cost, the printing cost, the assembly cost, because it's not just printing the thing, it's having the packs all put together, which is the huge cost. So it's a very finely balanced equation to actually make it work, and it's only because we've got so many stockists that the whole thing adds up.
I think you've hit it there. Having stockists, having a distribution network. So many times I've spoken to other poets and they sort of say, well, publisher, they're very good, but then once it's printed, bam, it's up to you to sort of do readings and sell them and get them into shops. And pamphlets, shops don't really want pamphlets because they haven't got a spine with a name on it or a title. So then it's often over to the poet to do the distributing. And I wonder if that's a common issue. I don't know, Sharon, do you find poets need help? Is it possible really to get a distribution network for single author full collections?
A lot rests on the poet. I mean, I make that clear at the outset. Yeah. Their books are for sale via the online bookshop, via Amazon. I have links with a couple of very small poetry bookshops in Scotland, and so I stock some titles there. But otherwise, it's up to the poet. And I obviously do what I can to help spread the word. But I'm not a big social media user, to be honest. I use Facebook and put up some news about what's going on with the press on Facebook. I put out a newsletter 3-4 times a year with details of all the latest titles. We have quite a good database of people signed up to the newsletter. But, I do stress it's really about getting out and doing readings. And I don't put pressure on poets to do that.
Let's just set aside the publishing for the minute, because we had Helen Ivory on in a previous episode, and she was thrilled to be asked to read her own poetry, because normally everyone just, it's Helen Ivory, yes, Ink, Sweat and Tears, and that's kind of it. Poets who run poetry presses usually get asked about that and aren't always associated with the poetry that they write. But you are both working poets, and you've both got books out very recently, haven't you, this year, I think?
Yes.
I suppose, first of all, Di, does it impact on your writing, running a poetry press, negatively or positively?
Yes. Oh, absolutely. And, because I'm trying to do three things really, with running the animal sanctuary and running the poetry press and then my own writing. And my own writing is always the Cinderella in the equation. So, that gets shoved to the end of the line. And, I have had moments where I've wrestled with that and thought, well, how do I make this work? And then I thought, well, it is what it is, really. I get a lot from all the different aspects of my life. And maybe at times my own writing will just go to the background, and then other times it'll become more prominent. I've made my peace with that now, I think.
Oh, that's good. That's good. So you go with the flow. You don't sort of
go with the flow.
Oh, I haven't written anything in months or whatever.
No, I used to get very stressed about not writing, and because I'm a very task-oriented person. So setting deadlines or having an output, that was always really important. But it just can't work that way.
Yeah.
And because also, if you try and manage that too much, you lose the joy.
Yeah.
And I think the nicest time of being a poet was when I didn't know very much, when I didn't know about the industry, when I didn't know who was who, didn't know what I needed to do to be recognised or known. Those were blissful days, when you're starting out and it's all new and sparkly. So then you kind of feel the burden of the machine, of the industry, of your peers pressing on you. And that is quite a weight, I think. The pressure to produce stuff and to have books. It takes you away from what drew you to writing poetry in the first place, certainly what drew me to writing poetry in the first place, which was the joy of the craft.
I think that's a good point. Sharon, what's your experience of that? How do you find time to write? Do you make time to write, or do you kind of go with the flow according to your other commitments?
I am a very undisciplined person when it comes to my own writing, and I have a feeling that if I was very disciplined with my writing, I wouldn't write anything. I mean, I just wouldn't write anything that I was pleased with. I write very sporadically. I have a week that I take in the spring in Scotland with a group of other writers. We go to the island of Iona, and it's a very intense week of creating fresh drafts, and I have a lot of work I come back with after that I rework for the following weeks. And then I have occasional what I call poetry stone months, where with a friend, sometimes with 2 other friends who are also poets, we take a calendar month, like the month of July, and every day send a piece of writing to each other. So by the end of, by midnight on that, every day for the month of July, we send a piece of writing to each other. And that is also a very constructive time for me. But otherwise, I just kind of, whenever I feel the urge, really. And I think, as you said, Di, if it was anything other than that for me, it wouldn't be a joyful process. I write when I feel I have something to say and when I feel I can't not write. And in terms of fitting pin drop into that, I'm much more structured with that, because that feels like a different side of my brain gets used for pin drop work, when it comes to editing and it comes to sort of sensible things like pagination and, creating working with the poet to edit the manuscript to the best it can be. That feels like a very different process. So I have no problem structuring myself in that work.
So to come to your own work, Di, your book that's come out this year, Herd Queen, is a full collection. I've been enjoying it.
Thank you.
It's sort of in 3 parts, isn't it? The first section is really to do with your experience on your animal sanctuary. It's an animal sanctuary, isn't it? It's not is it a farm? It's not actually a farm.
No, it's an ancient farm site, but it's a registered charity. It's an animal sanctuary for livestock and, disabled and special needs animals.
2 things I wrote down, 2 words, compound words. You seem to have a kind of a real liking for these neologisms, these compound words, which you use to great effect, particularly in that first half of the book. I'm sure you can give some examples of that. And the other one was form. You seem to enjoy working with form. Sestina quite early in the book, which always makes me think, ooh, proper poet.
Oh dear.
So I don't know, do you want to tell us a bit about this collection and how it came about?
So it picks up some of the themes of my previous collection, Reward for Winter, which was very much about the heritage of the place we live in and the farm and the characters that inhabited the space before us, and the land and the animals, and my discovery of all of that. So that was kind of book 1. And then this picks up where that one left off in the first part of the collection, looking at the animals and the land again, and then takes a little sidestep away more into personal relationships, family relationships, not always my family relationships, but other people's, and historical relationships as well. So kind of keeping that historical link. And then I had these other poems, the naughty poems, the kind of sideways glance poems that needed to go somewhere. And I had ummed and ahed about them being something separate, maybe a pamphlet. But I thought, well, why not? Why not add them on? Because part of the reason for calling the book Herd Queen, because that particular poem is about a leading goat who is very feisty and organises the rest of her disorganised herd and is very capricious, as you would expect from a goat. So why could the collection, why could it not have all of those different things? Why could it not zig and zag around a little bit and do something a little bit unexpected? So that was the reason for those extra poems at the end, which I did think might be a springboard into something else if I could ever get out of the farm to do something about that particular area of work. But yes, I thought that might give me a bit of a kick up the bum to do something more along those lines.
Yeah. It's certainly a wide-ranging collection, isn't it, in style and topic, everything from the lyrics of Prince songs to historical characters and their legal issues or whatever.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Would you like to read us a poem, give us a taster, something from the book?
Sure. Loading the trailer. The photos stopped me scrolling, screen held up close while my cheeks flushed to match the colour of her T-shirt. Bitch spelled out in half-hatched, fading letters across the egg-flat tits drooping to her waist. The collie at her feet probably was a bitch, loyal to her clique, licking hand to taste an awful leak of tears that spilled to soak a farming lifetime's gruffness. Where her hair was up and pinned, it splayed now in thin, pale strands, forehead shining bare, while October sun picked out scurf between liver spots and wrinkles. Shrunk to below the family 5-foot marker, behind the truck and trailer she was lost, too drunk on memories fully proof of every birth and death here to admit her own. The last to leave nuzzled her neck, his giant ears gently flicking her cheek as he passed her up the ramp. This one she'd had for more years than she'd kept her husband, longer than she'd known a friend. They drove away while silence wrapped her in its shroud. Late autumn heat unbearable on the yard at midday.
Oh, it's heartbreaking, isn't it?
That was triggered by a photo of a friend on Facebook who had actually got to give up her animals, and she actually died, I think probably 6 months to a year after that photo came up. But it did just trigger the thought, what happens to us, all the dependencies that we have, whether they're animal or human, what happens when we reach that point where we have to voluntarily surrender them because we're moving on to a different stage of our life.
That's lovely, but yeah. It's a Herd Queen, published by Valley Press.
Valley Press, yes.
Now, Sharon, your pamphlet, so you mentioned that this is your first pamphlet, so you've had full collections before, haven't you?
2. I've had 2 full collections so far, and this is my first pamphlet.
It's called Rib. I was taken straight away because the very first poem, Scan, there's mention of radiation, so I've already scribbled down cancer, ? And so basically, for listeners, it's 24 poems, and the idea is they represent the 24 ribs in the human body. I've got that right, haven't I?
Yeah.
Basically, yes, an exploration of the female form, attitudes to female form and beauty, mixed in with presumably your experiences of having treatment and cracking ribs, and ribs get cracked more than once, don't they, in this book, and dealings with consultants, but mixed in with some stories about various characters, such as, is it Pixie,
yes,
one of these social media influencers who had a few ribs removed to give herself a bit more of a waist, as you do. Have I guessed this correctly? Is this from your own experience?
So last year I fractured 3 of my ribs. I'm not somebody, and I don't come from a family where bones get broken, so I've never had a broken bone before. Touch wood, I don't have any more. And I broke 3 ribs, not knowing how it happened, really. I'd been on holiday to Scotland, would come back. I think it probably came about from lifting very heavy cases from the boot of a car. But I had this terrible pain in my chest for a few weeks, finally went for an x-ray, and I was told that they were fractured. And then I found out that almost certainly it was because I'd had radiotherapy on my chest the 2 years before, and that causes the ribs to become, it causes any bone under the radiotherapy to be weakened for up to 15 years, I was told, after treatment. 15 years, I said to her. That can't be 15 years. She said, yeah, that's right. You have to be careful for 15 years. So I hadn't realised that. I broke these 3 ribs, and later on in the summer, I tripped up in the dark by the recycling bins, and just as they were healing, broke them all again. So, so I had a few painful months last year, and what better thing to do than to write about it? Of course I was going to write about it. Once I'd exhausted everything I felt I could say about my own bodily experience, I then discovered the likes of Pixie Fox, this internet model who had had ribs removed for her tiny 16-inch waist, discovered stories about ribs related to Aztec mythology. I'd been to the catacombs in Paris the previous year and had a very interesting visit into these corridors of walls of bones, but notably no ribs. So I set myself to wondering where the ribs might have been stashed, and so on and so forth. And so after I had my 24 poems, that's when I thought, well, what can I do with these? Maybe, I know, there's this thing called pamphlets out there. And it was a lot of fun to write. I mean, it really was the silver lining of my clouds of chest pain last year.
That could be one of your next anthologies, could it? 10 poems about ribs. But Sharon's not allowed to hog the whole thing. She's only allowed 1 poem.
Exactly.
Can you pick one that you'd like to read that gives us a taster of rib?
So I'm going to read one which is about my relationship with my body during the time I had my broken ribs, and it kind of goes a bit off on one as well. It's called Seasonal. I can't do things by halves. Every day I share my swimming spot with a snake, aiming for the opposite bank, I force my breathing to relax and my body to soften until it's almost boneless. They say there's going to be a heat wave. From the ceiling, flakes of paint fall like crisp white islands on the ocean of my bed. My chest hurts. I can't turn on my mattress. The weeks stretch on and on like a row of upended dominoes. I breathe carefully, noiselessly, so none of them topple. Last night, I dreamed I swam all the way through Antarctica.
Thank you. Dominoes, breathing carefully. And there's another poem, isn't there, where the consultant says you just got to be careful. And you're thinking like, yeah, careful when I pick up a suitcase or...
Oh, okay then.
Thank you for that. Rib from Wayleaf Press, a very nice pamphlet. Okay, future plans. Anything that you're working on now or looking forward to getting stuck into, or anything you want to share? Di?
Publishing wise, so last year was pretty dreadful. Because
why is that?
Hard to imagine, isn't it? But because Candlestick's dependent on stockists, and everywhere was closed. So not just bookshops, but gift shops or the British Museum, everywhere was closed. So our what had been the biggest strength of our business quickly became the biggest weakness, and as the whole thing collapsed. And then with Bertram's going into liquidation as well, really put the boot in terms of cash flow, leaving us with a nice bad debt. So last year was horrible, and we only managed to publish 6 titles in total over the course of the year. So this year we're kind of gathering ourselves together and getting ready for next year to be a bumper year. So that's really what we're looking forward to doing. Probably around about 15 to 18 titles next year. So that would be quite exciting. Yeah.
Wow. So you're back on it.
Yes,
well
trying
done.
to be.
Yeah. Sharon?
Well, in terms of my own work, at the moment I'm polishing a collection that's going to be coming out next year called The Red House, which is about the Cévennes, where I live, and it's made up of 3 separate threads. One taking as a starting point objects in a museum not far from here, which I've used as sort of jumping off points to explore the history and the heritage of the Cévennes. Another strand being local life as it's lived now, our local village of Saint-André de Valborgne. And thirdly, my own relationship with this area and experiences since I moved here almost 20 years ago. It's due out next autumn, and I'm still working on, I don't actually know when I have to hand it in to the publisher, Drunk Muse Press, but I suspect I've probably got another 5 or 6 months. In terms of pin drop, I'm getting ready to work on collections by Mike Barlow and by Elizabeth Sennett Clough. Both are very, very different, which always makes for a more interesting back-to-back experience as an editor. Elizabeth's collection will be her second one with pin drop, so it's exciting to see how she's progressed and how her work has changed since her first collection Sightings came out a few years ago. I think that will make for an enjoyable end of year in terms of pin drop.
Have you found that working with poets and their work, the work that's come into you as a publisher, has had a positive effect on your own writing?
I do find that there is a certain kind of feeding in. If I love another poet's work and I have the privilege of getting really stuck into it with them, it definitely has a certain effect on my own writing. I can find myself inspired to put pen to paper myself, or even try out a different style that is not my typical style. It can set me off in new directions, and that's interesting. And I'm not sure to what extent that would happen if I was not having such an intimate relationship with the work.
Well, that's interesting, isn't it?
It is interesting.
It's more to do really with my relationship, that it's not so much working with the poet themselves, it's getting that into the nitty-gritty of their work.
Yeah.
Can seem to kind of have a trampoline effect for me in my own writing.
Yeah. I find a similar thing happens sometimes if I'm asked to review something or I've been studying it through a course I've been doing. And as you say, perhaps deeper into the material, and then it kind of triggers things in your own work. That's what you're saying, isn't it? Sorry,
Totally. No, you're right. Yeah.
That's woman-splaining here.
I don't know though, Di, have you noticed that? Do you have anything of that goes on for you?
I think because we're doing anthologies, it's slightly different. I think it's to do with volume and anthologies because you're so broad, you haven't got the depth. So it's almost like being in the sweet shop of your dreams. You're surrounded by all of these fantastic things of all these different flavours, all directions, all different shapes and sizes and textures. And so it can be inspiring, as you've said. It can really lift you up and focus on your own work and make you think, oh, yeah, gosh, I'd like to do that. But it can also just be so overwhelming. It's too much stimulus. And in a way, I find that I need less to be able to produce more of my own work. I need less interference. I need less of other people's ideas and words in my head.
Interesting. Have you ever found, has a poet submitted their work and you've not heard of them before and you've really been impressed by the work, or, almost like you've just feel like you've discovered them? Or does that sort of not really happen in terms of an anthology, single poems coming together?
When we've run the competitions, which we have done now for the last 2 or 3 years on a particular theme, we've definitely found some gems, some new people, new voices to me and certainly to Kathy. And then, interestingly, when they've been published in our pamphlet, you start to see them appearing in the scrolls of the competitions and everything else. So their work is obviously evolving and coming on. And that's really lovely to see. I'm not saying that we've played any part of that, but we're obviously hitting their moment, where they're starting to be
early in the...
Yes. And it's very gratifying, I think, to see that they are starting to find their place in the poetry world.
Well, I know it's not a labour of love for both of you, but I think anyone, in the publishing industry, it kind of is, because if there weren't small press publishers, then where would all we needy poets get our poems published? And you're both doing a fantastic job, clearly. So all kudos. And thank you very much for coming on and talking with me today. Thank you to Sharon Black.
Thank you, Robin.
And thank you to Di Slaney.
Thank you, Robin. That's been great.
Our experiment worked, didn't it? Talking to two people at the same time worked really well. It was great to hear from Sharon and Di, because these people are kind of unsung heroes, aren't they? These are the people that actually keep the dreams of the rest of us poets alive by providing, outlets for people's writing.
Absolutely.
I really like the way Di was kind of, with her Candlestick Press, was kind of unapologetic about needing it to work, as a business.
Yeah.
I've sort of dabbled in other kinds of artistic expression. Poetry is kind of particularly sort of weird about money, whereas if you're putting a play on, for example, you need to know that you're going to at least break even before you do it, unless you've got very deep pockets, or, it's a vanity project.
Yeah, that's a good point.
If you know you can break even, then that's doing it for love, and anything else is a bonus. But poets have just no expectation of making money, really, do they? And that sort of infects everything.
I think that's true. Although you could sort of say, well, actually a play, it can't happen without money and lots of people. I suppose poetry, at the bottom line, is you can just write poetry and put it out there, and you don't have to make money from it. It doesn't really have any overheads to cover, apart from the publisher's overheads. And as we know, there are many hybrid models that mean that publishers can afford to say, well, I don't mind if it doesn't sell loads of copies. I mean, that's an extraordinary situation, I imagine, in the publishing world.
Mm. I think you were sort of saying this in the interview, or alluding to it. I've known plenty of poets who the underneath of their mattress is kind of stuffed with boxes of unsold books and things that, that have been published and acknowledged and reviewed and everything. When the onus falls on the poet to sell the work as well, you can have all kinds of lapses in confidence, or just kind of get exhausted with the idea of just touting yourself all the time, because poets are gentle souls, aren't they? They're not necessarily the best at flogging their own work.
No, that's right. Bottom line, I think what you say, I think is true. It was nice to have this two contrasting angles, and yet they had lots in common as well. And clearly, Di is not. It's not that Di is an executive at a publishing house.
No, yeah,
doing the balancing the books. She's also a poet. So, and clearly, the way that Candlestick Press, the way she pulls together the different contributors, is very inclusive and very sensitive to the way that poets work.
Yeah. When you're doing something like publishing or running publishing business, you have to be excellent at time management, I think, because, just the sheer... Years ago, I edited a small magazine called Cobweb, and then I did an e-zine called Another Sun for a while. And just the sheer amount of time one has to dedicate to just reading poems, and when you're just out there, you get all kinds of work through,
I must admit, you edited a magazine. There was a time when I thought, it'd be fun to edit a magazine, start a magazine. But quite honestly, as time goes on, I know I just couldn't do it because most poetry I read, it doesn't appeal to me.
Yeah.
But it's the few, the 10% or whatever that you just think, this is good stuff. And occasionally there's that 0.001% that gives me that, what I call the Salieri moment.
Yeah.
Did you ever see that film, Amadeus?
Yes.
For people who've not seen it, Salieri is this sort of very accomplished, confident court composer. It's just where he wants to be, top of his game. And Mozart comes along, the young pretender, and his wife takes some sheet music to show Salieri because she's desperate for money. And you see him reading this music, and the music's going through his head, and he just swoons. His eyes close. The music drops to the floor, and there's this moment when he just realizes his entire life has been a waste. That he would never ever be a Mozart. And I always sort of felt that was the most heartbreaking and marvelous moment of the film. So very occasionally, you get that feeling. Do you? I sort of think, I don't know why I even bother, really.
Only every other day.
So, I really enjoyed what they had to say, and it was very interesting to hear the different ways that they work and the whole background to it all. Di with all her rescue animals, and Sharon in her sort of amazing French hideaway.
In the Languedoc amongst all the goats, yeah. I did have a lot of sympathy with what Di was saying about, when she writes herself, she needs to get away and have a fewer people and read less and just kind of...
Yeah, that was interesting.
I do understand that. I love reading other people's work, all different kinds of work. But to be creative, I'm not one of these people that can read a poem and then think, aha, I'm going to write another poem. I need to be sort of feel like there's a kind of... that I'm an island somehow surrounded by silence and, a bit of calmness.
Yes. I sort of feel like I'm a mix of the two. Sometimes I find if I've read something that's really inspired me, then I quickly want to go and put pen to paper. But then I do need that island at that point. I need the island, I think.
I love this, the Herd Queen. I just really like that as a title. That was about a goat, wasn't it? It's all a bit nativity scene, isn't it? With sort of all these animals creeping on the edges of the poems. Very topical. And I really liked the idea of this pamphlet about ribs. There's just something very satisfying, and the way that just ribs are all there, it's sort of interlaced and in a pattern. Somehow that just conjured up a small collection of poems and ribs. I don't know. It just worked in my head somehow. It was a visual image as well as an idea.
I think they are fascinating bones, the fact that we think of our ribs as being at the front, but of course they're at the back as well. It's ridiculous, but they go all the way around. But ribs for me are fascinating too, because the way, they're always moving, the way they move to allow the lungs to expand, and but we take them completely for granted. But,
there's a short story by Ray Bradbury about somebody who has a horror of their own bones.
Really?
And basically they just eat and eat and eat until they can no longer feel the bones inside them.
Oh, wow.
I can't remember how it ends, but I suspect not particularly well.
It's a very busy time of year. I know you've been busy with work as well, Peter, but have you been managing to read anything for pleasure?
Yeah, well, I'm sort of cheating in a way, but the book I read this time of year, almost unfailingly, is called The Box of Delights by John Masefield. And it's a children's book. And it's just... I just can't think of a more imaginative children. I've read a lot of children's literature, and it's just my favourite, probably my favourite children's book. It's not so well known as things like The Hobbit and Harry Potter's and all those kind of things. It was published in 1935, but it was written by John Masefield, who was a poet laureate. He was a poet laureate for ages, actually, between 1930 and 1967 when he died. Digging into things about John Masefield's childhood, his parents, classically, his parents both died when he was very young, and he was brought up by an aunt and sent off to school, a public school in Warwick, which he absolutely loathed and kind of basically escaped from it, and then ran off to sea at the age of 14. And one of the things that his aunt really disapproved of him was that, he was addicted to reading. And
Really?
she was very disapproving of this, apparently. But he went off to sea and travelled the world, and then ended up disembarking in the US and then roaming around the country for a while, and then ending up in New York doing odd jobs like working in bars and things, and then ended up, when he was like 17, working in a carpet factory.
So quite a lot packed into those few teenage years then.
Yeah, so it's such a colourful background, and this nautical stuff just really feeds into his work. Sailing the globe on his own, a little boy, basically starting at 14. That seems like it comes from a far earlier century, really, doesn't it?
Yeah, yeah.
So his most famous poem is this Sea Fever one. Is it worth reading that?
Love Sea Fever. Yeah, read it.
Sea Fever by John Masefield. I must go down to the seas again, to the lonely sea and the sky, and all I ask is a tall ship and a star to steer her by, and the wheels kick and the wind's song and the white sail shaking, and a grey mist on the sea's face and a grey dawn breaking. I must go down to the seas again, for the call of the running tide is a wild call and a clear call that may not be denied. And all I ask is a windy day with the white clouds flying and the flung spray and the blown spume and the seagulls crying. I must go down to the seas again, to the vagrant gypsy life, to the gull's way and the whale's way, where the wind's like a whetted knife, and all I ask is a merry yarn from a laughing fellow rover, and a quiet sleep and a sweet dream when the long trick's over.
Oh God, it's really moving. There's a lovely setting of it. It's music by John Ireland.
Oh, is there?
Yeah, a few years ago, we went to a funeral where a friend of ours, who's a singer, sang this, and the person who died I hardly knew, but I was so moved by this beautiful singing of this. The words and the music just seemed to sit together so well.
I had to, the last line, a sweet dream when the long trick's over. Apparently a trick is you probably know this, but I didn't know, is a kind of a period at the helm, like a watch at the helm where you're steering the boat for
is it?
2 or 4 hours or something.
I thought it was something to do with, like in the military, what do they call it? A tour of duty, that sort of thing.
Yeah.
But that makes sense. But it also has this lovely sense of, the end of one's life. It's just a beautiful, beautiful poem.
Yeah. So anyway, The Box of Delights is just something I read every Christmas. It is set in Christmas, and it's a boy returning home, and he gets tangled up in magic and sort of criminal gangs led by a magician called Abner Brown is after him. He's given this magical box to keep and protect from these forces of evil, and it's called the Box of Delights, and it shrinks you, and he has adventures, sort of mouse-sized, creeping around with mice and spying on people and things, and then he can fly swiftly and he can go back in time. And there's all kinds of magical encounters, but it's just so phenomenally imaginative. But one thing, in sort of just reading about him for this podcast, this idea that, he was disapproved of as a kid because of, he was addicted to reading. In a way, this sort of magical box really stands for the whole of literature, or for storytelling and stories and everything. This is a description of this box of delights. The box was of some very hard wood of a dense grain. It had been covered with shagreen, but the shagreen was black with age, and sometimes worn away so as to show the wood beneath. Both wood and shagreen had been polished until they were smooth as a polished metal. On the side of it was a little countersunk groove, in the midst of which was a knob. "I press this to open," he repeated. "If I push it to the right, I can go small, whatever that may mean. If I push it to the left, I can go swift, and that I've tried. I do want to see what's inside it. I wonder, is this wood that it's made of lignum vitae wood?" "It is the wood the phoenix builds in," the box said. "Is it really?" Kay said. "No wonder it smells like spice." Then he saw that the groove was inlaid with gold, and that the golden knob within the groove had been carven into the image of a rosebud, and which was extraordinarily fragrant. "I say," Kay said to himself, "this is a wonderful box. Now I'll open it." He pressed the tiny golden rosebud, and at once from within the box there came a tiny crying of birds. As he listened, he heard the stock-dove brooding, the cuckoo tolling, blackbirds, thrushes, and nightingales singing. Then a faraway cock crowed thrice, and the box slowly opened. Inside he saw what he took to be a book, the leaves of which were all chased and worked with multitudinous figures, and the effect that it gave him was that of staring into the opening in a wood. It was lit from within. Multitudinous tiny things were shifting there. Then he saw that the things which were falling were the petals of may blossom from giant hawthorn trees covered with flowers. And then there's this beautiful description of a wood, and then he meets Herne the hunter and goes off and starts shape-changing and having magical adventures.
I love that idea of the box.
But just that idea that opening the box, and it's like, he's comparing it to a book, and the magic of his childhood. This orphaned boy was actually in books. And then there he is writing this book called The Box of Delights that has delighted this child for decades. Yeah.
It's a lovely idea, isn't it? And it is. I mean, I haven't read any children's literature since I was a child, to be honest. I don't know, unless you count, those books about farting and pants, for toddlers. But that's so that takes me to, The Lion, the Witch and the Wardrobe, and that whole kind of genre of slightly fantastic, but such beautiful, realistic detail. Detail of the rose on the little knob and how it was carved and everything. Yeah. And then the blossom.
One of the characteristics, I think, of good writing is that it appeals to all the senses. I got that from reading NLP once, and I used to teach a copywriting course. What I used to do was get people before the class to write a description of their childhood bedroom, and then they would come in and read it. And a lot of people described it visually, but there was no sense of touching or what things smelt like or the things you could hear.
Yeah.
Whereas other people there was one person that came in, it was all about the sounds of the street outside and the church nearby. And it's amazing. Most people prioritize visual things, but
yes,
that's why Shakespeare, and I think this is the big lesson that Keats got from Shakespeare, was that, you read Keats and it's just assailing all your senses all the time. And when Kay opens his magical box, there are smells there as well. There's visions and smells, and how it's worn thin. It's tactile as well. Everything,
and the bird song and everything. Particular birds. Yes, amazing. Good point. So it is quite a busy time of year. So I've been a bit taken up with other things, but I attacked a book by Sacha Dugdale, which I had recently acquired, because in fact, I won't say much about it though, because in fact, she's going to be one of our guests in the new year.
Oh, brilliant. Yeah.
Which will be lovely to hear her read from her books and talk to her about her work. But she is a poet that I admire a great deal, and she just quietly gets on with it. And she's written quite a few books. She's an amazing poet, very talented translator. I heard her read in Russian as well once when she was reading some Akhmatova, and she read in the original.
Wow.
So she's got an amazing background, so I'm looking forward to talking with her. But yes, I'm reading her book. It's called Deformations.
Oh, right, yes.
And it's by, Carcanet.
Is that the new? I read one of her books. I can't remember the title, just a few months ago.
Yes, well, I've got Joy. Maybe you read Joy, the one about William Blake.
Oh, yes, that's right.
A few years ago.
Yeah, I read that.
Yes, this is more recent. This is last year, but it's in 3 sections. And the first section is centred around Eric Gill. That's quite challenging reading, but that's probably the section I haven't quite got to grips with. And then the last section is based on characters from the Odyssey, and there's sort of fragments, there's reworkings of things, and that's quite interesting. And then the middle section are some diverse poems, several of which, I've been reading and then rereading and feeling really uplifted by, and almost a Salieri moment. I won't say more about that, but Sasha Dugdale, Deformations, and we'll be talking to her in the new year at some point. Now, you might think that it's like the BBC studios here at Planet Poetry HQ. It's all very slick. We've got those mixer desks and faders and lackeys coming in with cups of coffee and stuff. And it's not much dissimilar to that, is it, Peter? I think.
No, it's utterly professional.
But nevertheless, occasionally we do make the odd, slip up. But for your delectation, as it's Christmas, we thought we'd share with you some of the moments when we've been left a little bit tongue-tied, shall we say.
We think of you, our listener, as a secret weapon, able to pass on via the medium of email or their own mouths the fact that Planet Poetry is something to listen to. Oh, God.
And somehow it works. It has a... God, I'm rambling like...
Something very short and snappy by Emily Dickens. Oh, for
What is the... what's the word I want? The kind of tone of voice. There's a word, isn't there? What's the... what is that word?
This is the 20th episode. We finally got ourselves together enough to create a web page for our podcast, and it's planetpoetry.com.
No, it's not. It's planetpoetrypodcast.com.
Should we just ditch that and start again?
Okay.
And the website address is planetpoetrypodcast.com. So please visit planetpoetrypodcast.com to visit, to download previous episodes and all the rest of it. Oh shit, I don't know, Robin. It's a kind of 21st episode present to ourselves. We now. Oh, sorry. Jesus.
That's right. And if you visit the website, you can see all the previous episodes and quite a description of what was on them. So, what else is on that website? Anything much? Oh God, what is that hummy noise?
Oh, that's my effing neighbour starting up with one of his power tools.
Okay, now. I'll have to just... Okay, so... Welcome to Planet Poetry from the
workshops.
I'm sure we can pull something out of that.
Do you think so? I hope so. Just sounding like the cheesiest salesman in the world. So, I know it's hard to believe we're not, all that slick all the time, but that was a glimpse behind the wizard's curtain. There's a lot more where that came from.
Well, it's the end of another year of podcasts, and we just want to say thank you for listening.
Yeah, it's been an entire year, hasn't it? All of 2021. I still love doing it, don't you?
Oh yes, long may it continue. We're back in January, aren't we?
Yes, mid-January. We're not committing to an exact date yet, but certainly start looking at your screens with beady-eyed interest in the middle of January.
We'll be back. We've already got some really good guests lined up, so we're looking forward to that. And I hope you are too.
Yes.
I think all we need to say is a big old Merry Christmas.
Yes, Merry Christmas.
From all of us.
All two of us. And our imaginary friends.